Today we are going to learn how to complete averages inside of a Google Sheet. So you can use that as a calculation tool. Instead of using a calculator, it will do the formula for you. So the first thing I'm going to do inside of my Google Drive is click New and Google Sheets. Once this Google Sheet is open, I will eventually give it a name. But I would need to go up here towards the top eventually and click on Untitled Spreadsheet and change it. The next thing I would do would be to input all of the data that I need. So for this particular lab activity, we did the conservation of mass. That's my example I'm using today. And I would want to put in the heading titles for myself. So this was the bottle and H2O. This was the tablet, initial mass, final mass, and the change in mass. I also would want to just make sure everything got moved over a cell so that I can also put the trial numbers, so trial 1, 2, 3, as well as a cell to use for the averages. So I'm basically replicating that entire table that I had on my lab report and on my notes to do the lab in my journal. Then what I would do would be to input the data. So for trial 1, my bottle and H2O was 63.7 grams. I don't have to use units for this particular activity since I am doing calculations. The tablet was 1.1, so the initial mass, I'm going to use a calculation here. I'm going to do sum. So I'm going to go up to, over here, to this little function bar, and I'm going to click sum. And then I'm going to highlight these two cells that I want to add together and click enter. And now in here, it has added B2 and C2 together. Now I'm going to drag and drop it down, which applies the function to these two cells. Basically saying B3 and C3 added together, put it here. B4 and C4 added here, put it together here. So once I plug in numbers, this over here, this calculation will change. So I'm going to plug in trial 2, the bottle and H2O was 65.9. The tablet was 1.0. And look, it goes from 65.9 to 66.9. That calculation, that math was already done for me. And over here, in my third trial, it was 64.8 and a 0.9 gram tablet, 65.7. So that was one way to use a calculation. Then, after I did the chemical reaction, input the tablet into the bottle, we massed it again, and for this time, my initial mass, or my final mass, was 64.8. It was exactly the same. In the trial 2, my final mass was 66.8. And in the last one, it was 65.8. So over in change of mass, I want to include another function if I can. So what we're trying to do is subtract the final mass from the initial mass and get the product, well, not the product, but the difference here. So I'm going to go back to my function tablet, and I'm going to look for something that's going to tell me about subtraction. So I might even want to search. There's a help bar that I can search. And I can look for subtraction, insert the function minus. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to insert the function minus here. Let's put it up here. Insert minus. And I'm going to click this first, and then the next one. So I'm taking E2 and subtracting D2 from it. When I click enter, I'll see that there was no change. When I bring that function down, I should see that there was a negative change. I lost a 0.1 of a gram in the second trial and gained 0.1 of a gram in the third trial. So just from these 3 trials, I really can't make any conclusions about whether or not my hypothesis was true or false, depending on what my hypothesis was. And now I want to do average, which I should make sure I spell that correctly. So the average column. What I'm going to do is go back to function and click the average. And then I'm going to highlight the 3 cells I want averaged together and click enter. What that did is added all 3 up and divided by the total number of cells. And then I will drag it across, and it will now take the average of every single one of my columns. So the average for the bottle and water was 64.8. The tablet was 1. The initial mass was 65.8. The final mass was 65.8, which meant that there was no change in mass. Looking at the averages now, I can now make a conclusion. Not on each individual trial, but overall, on average, mass was not created or destroyed. And that's what I was trying to prove in this particular activity. That the mass, when combined, is going to be the same once it actually is combined. What I think is going to happen will happen once the reaction happens. So now that I've done this, I can now easily transport those numbers into my Google Doc. Not by copying and pasting because of the functions, but I now don't have to sit and do the calculations. I can easily just type in 64.81, 65.8, 65.80, plug all those those numbers into my data table in my lab report. I can always go up to the top and share the document with my teacher. So I'm going to give it a title with Conservation of Mass Calculations. Maybe I want to call it lab number 1 first. And then I'm going to start typing my teacher's name and share it to her. Now my teacher sees this, and they'll be able to look at my calculations as well as seeing them inside of my lab report. Alright, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, your teacher. Bye, guys.